The The PlayStation 4 is one of my favorite video game systems of all time. Ever since it launched, I've been having a blast collecting for it, but also collecting and playing the amazing exclusive games that Sony keeps giving to us on the system. And some of you may remember a while back, I did quite a few lists on the PlayStation 4 recommending some of the best exclusives to go and pick up. However, after I made the last PlayStation list, I felt that I had tapped out my resources. I had gone through all the amazing games up to that date. Well, as of today, we have almost a year's worth of amazing PlayStation 4 exclusives that I can tackle, talk about, and recommend to all of you. And of course, that also means we have a year's worth of terrible, terrible games that I don't understand how they even got through the development stage, let alone found themselves on the PlayStation 4. So, subscribe, because I'd really appreciate it, and this is 10 PlayStation 4 games worth buying, and 5, nope, they're really bad. Let's get started. As I try to work my way into all of your hearts, let's kick this list off with Persona 5. And actually, I did talk about this game in one of my previous PlayStation 4 lists. Not only do I feel like it needs and deserves more attention, I feel I didn't do it enough justice the first time around. So I feel I owe it to this game to take a deeper look at it and show you why I believe it's one of the best JRPGs of all time. In fact, I need to dive deeper into the earlier Persona games, as the only other one I've played is 4. But holy moly, Persona 4 is near perfection for me. 5 is just as amazing, with over 100 hours of gameplay just in one casual playthrough. You play as a group of troubled teenage high schoolers who gradually begin to realize they're living in a dangerous world, corrupted and twisted by adults. And aided by a kitty cat, and you have to love that, even though he does get a tiny bit annoying during the battles, but it's fine. You use otherworldly powers to enter the hearts of people in order to reshape them and transform them. And while you are inside someone's heart, you see their corrupted and sick view of themselves and the world around them, which becomes the dungeon that you explore, defeating enemies in awesome and fleshed out turn-based battles where you unleash each character's persona. There is so much to this in-depth JRPG that really I should have just made it its own video, but the thing that I love the most about it is you essentially are just living the life as a teenager in Tokyo. You know, despite going into people's hearts and destroying enemies in dungeons, you live a normal, typical life. Each day passes on a calendar as you play, and you spend your in-game time doing really whatever you want. Around going to school and battling in dungeons to progress the story, everything else is left up to you. What path do you want to take? Who do you want to date? Who do you want to be friends with? Where do you eat? Where do you shop? After school finishes, do you want to play games at the arcade or partake in extra school activities or even take up a part-time job? And all of these choices dramatically affect your playthrough and ultimately shapes your game and your ending. It really feels like a great anime meets a life simulator meets a fantastic JRPG. Persona 5 is an absolute must-play for any fan of the JRPG genre. I can't recommend it enough. In all of my other PlayStation 4 list videos, I have been consistently and constantly yelled at in the comment section for not including Bloodborne. I felt like it was an obvious choice, something that probably didn't need to be said. I guess it does need to be said, so let's talk about Bloodborne. Bloodborne is an action RPG very similar to the Dark Souls series, and that is no surprise, as it's brought to us by the same development team, From Software. However, in Bloodborne, the combat is faster paced and much more aggressive. What really makes these games fun to play, well for me anyway, is how tight all the hitboxes for you and the enemies are. It's also pixel perfect, making every dodge, parry, and attack really count. Your last second dodge and counter attack is that much more rewarding when you can see that enemy's sword and spear narrowly missing you by a razor's edge. And trust me, you really do want these hitboxes to be this perfect due to these games being notoriously difficult. Brutally, at times impossibly difficult. A lot of you already know this, but I suck at these kind of games, and I haven't put a whole lot of time into any of them, but that truly is the key to standing a chance against even the smallest of enemies. Time, patience, practice. Once you've done all of that, it can be an extremely rewarding game as well as still very frustrating. Oh, and another one of my favorite things about this game is the wonderful creature designs and just the overall very impressive art style. The way this game looks is sort of how I envision the afterlife, the demonic, demented afterlife, the one that you get kind of stuck in between heaven and hell, and you're sort of just in this purgatory. Purgatory or not, the art design in this is fantastic. There are many hours of enjoyment and possibly frustration, if you suck like me, to be found in Bloodborne. Alright, first up for not worth buying. It's probably really obvious. It's probably already the top comment down below. That's Knack 2, baby. Alright, I gotta be honest, Knack 2 is actually a lot better than Knack 1, but that's kind of not saying much. That's like saying a spoonful of Vegemite on its own is better than eating dog poop. Like, yeah, it's better, but you still don't want it. I don't want to play into the meme too much. We know that this game and the first one aren't exactly the best platformers the gaming world has ever handed us. But I've never talked about Knack on my channel before, and I guess this is the perfect time to make fun of it. So my big question is, after you make such a terrible game that is the first Knack, and it wasn't the worst game in the world, it was just very boring, they made a lot of mistakes, and it was just mostly uninspired. But why take that and say, hey, you know what we need? To throw money at a sequel. It's almost like Sony pride, like they wanted to prove they could make a better version. And sure, you made it a little better, but no one was interested for a reason. And not just because the game itself is boring, but because the characters and the setting and everything about it is just very lame. Honestly, just because it would be funny, I hope we get a Knack 3 one day. Throughout those earlier videos, I believe I've covered all of the Yakuzas except Yakuza Kiwami 2. To be honest, I'm kind of losing track of all these Yakuza games. It is such a beautiful and brilliant series, but I just can't keep up. The latest release to PlayStation 4 is Yakuza Kiwami 2. This game is a remake of the 2006 Yakuza 2, now running on the same engine as the most recent Yakuza 6. Much like the first Kiwami, this is exactly how you do a remake. Everything about the game has been upgraded and improved with a huge graphical overhaul. A stunningly gorgeous game that is incredibly detailed. Exploring the streets of Tokyo, there is just so much freaking detail. Street signs and advertisements everywhere, NPC characters going about their days, lights, soda machines, everything you would see on a real bustling street. It's almost sensory overload. Even the roads have realistic blemishes or pools of water near the curbs. You can explore so many of the shops and restaurants too, with places like convenience stores having even more little details inside. These open world action adventure games feature over-the-top violence with brutal fighting mechanics, where intense street fights can end up inside the stores I mentioned earlier, breaking furniture and messing up your enemies in the most brutal of ways. The weird storytelling will have you completing the craziest maiden sub-stories imaginable, and that doesn't even go into the half of what you can do in these games. There is just so much to see, do, and explore. They are so in-depth and fleshed out, and these remakes are perfect for going back to the start of the Yakuza story without having to dust off and boot up your PlayStation 2. If you haven't played any of these games yet, now is your chance to pick up Yakuza 0, start from the start, then go ahead and pick up the 2 original remakes and get to beating thugs with irons and benches. Or, you know, waste away your hours on claw machines and arcades. What you do in these games are really up to you. A lot of you at this point have probably either heard of or seen Detroit Become Human, but I just finished it recently, absolutely adore it, and I'm using this as my chance to talk about it. In my opinion, Quantic Dream has all but perfected the interactive storytelling genre. I think I played through Heavy Rain at least 3 times to get different endings, and I loved each playthrough more than the last. But when I heard they were making Detroit Become Human, I was almost disappointed. Playing as androids who felt kinda hard done by didn't really interest me as a concept, but I was foolish to think the amazing writing team they have wouldn't hook me instantly into this world. This style of storytelling game has you playing the lives of 3 different androids, Kara, Marcus, and Connor, as pictured on the inside of the game case, although to be honest, I would have played a whole game just as Connor. The game plays out almost like a playable movie, where you have to make a series of choices on top of more choices that constantly changes the game's story and the path you take. And there are so many freaking different choices that can lead to so many different outcomes. And one of the best things about Detroit is that at the end of each chapter, it shows you the web of choices you made and how many you could have made. And for the first time in one of these games, you can truly see how deep the web of possible stories and outcomes can be. And so to that end, you don't really ever get a game over screen. You have to live with the choices you make, and if you screw up, it's on you. And when you get invested in the story, it's so intense to the point where this was one of the first games I've played that gave me a choice, and I put the controller down and just had to walk away for a few minutes because I couldn't make it. And again, that just goes to show how amazing the storytelling storytelling is in this game. So yeah, pretty safe to say I became really invested and sympathetic towards the android cause. And of course, I haven't really talked about the story at all, and that's because I don't want to ruin it. I would say as a PlayStation 4 owner, you have to experience this game. It has 2 very likable characters and 1 extremely lovable character who I wish was my best friend. Dog Child isn't worth it. The name might have told you that in itself. Dog Child. But let's talk about why it's terrible. In Dog Child, you play as a dog and a child trying to... I don't even know. Honestly, I didn't care. As the dog, you roam around sniffing for clues, and as the child, you roam around sometimes climbing things and really awkwardly throwing a ball like no one ever taught him how. Like, you throw a ball at the enemies who, by the way, are army dudes with tasers while they're tasing you. Someone's tasing you. Is this your reaction? Don't worry about it, don't worry about actually ganging up on this kid and taking him down. No, just stand around and keep trying to tase him in turns while he throws the worst attempt at an overarm ball throw I have ever seen. And the dog, which, has big old bad dog teeth, yeah, he can't help you at all. You can switch to it, but just to keep on sniffing around the game. Oh, and the platforming is glitchy, broken, and dumb. The game looks awful, and the animation is terrible. That's a bad one. Probably stay away from it. Next up, we have a sequel to an amazing PlayStation 3 JRPG, and that's NiNuKuni 2. NiNuKuni 2 is an action RPG that also splices up some Kingdom Simulator aspects and occasional real-time strategy gameplay. A very whimsical, quirky, character-driven game that features an adventure and story you won't soon forget, as well as great writing and mostly fantastic voice acting. Mostly. I didn't love all of it. The combat takes place in real time, and I would liken it similar to the Kingdom Hearts style gameplay, meaning fast-paced, super fun, and I really dig it. There is a lot to consider in battles, from your allies to your melee weapons, rage weapons, blocks, dodges, and more. You also have these little hickory guys that roam around the battlefield kinda like Pikmin, and they give you things like healing buffs or powerful attacks. And by using the game's tactic tweaker and mixing up your own weapons and abilities, it leaves a lot of room to explore many different gameplay styles during combat. Also, this game isn't grindy at all, which I really like. In fact, low-level enemies will straight up ignore you unless you really want to battle them, which allows you to explore the world and level up at your own pace. Again, using the tactics tweaker can really give you the advantage in any situation. And also, trust me, you can waste away hours in Kingdom Simulator building and developing a better town. I don't completely adore every element in this game. I feel like it tries to do a lot of different things, and in my opinion, they don't always work so well together. More so, I'm talking about the RTS parts. I wasn't a huge fan of the way those played or looked. For the most part, this game is amazing, with a huge adventure that will keep you glued to the controller, just wanting to progress in the story, discovering more about the world and the quirky characters. I'm kind of cheating on this next one, and if you have an issue with that, take it up with my lawyer. I don't care. I'm putting SpiderMan on the list. And I know, but hear me out, hear my reasonings. Let's treat this as more of a preview to what will be a must-own PlayStation 4 game, and only because it's literally right around the corner at this point. In fact, it's so close to releasing that there's a good chance a lot of you are watching this after the fact anyway. This exclusive game drops on September 7th, and I can't tell you how excited I am. Developed by Insomniac Games, the same brilliant minds behind Ratchet & Clank and Sunset Overdrive, I have complete faith that this will be the Spider-Man game so many of us have been dying to get our hands on for years. Ever since Spider-Man 2 on PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube introduced us to the joy that is swinging through the streets of New York, so exhilarating and yet relaxing at the same time, maximizing your momentum on swings to get speed boosts and so much more, I have been begging the game developing world to recreate this open world, complex, and brilliant control scheme that gave us so much freedom in Spider-Man 2. And yet, for whatever reason, we kept getting further and further away from what made that game so great. They just either kept dumbing it down or were too lazy to actually build a complex swinging mechanic. Not only has Insomniac Games given us that ability in this new game, focusing on truly making you feel like Spider-Man, but they have spliced in combat elements from the Batman Arkham games and given the entire game a gorgeous visual style and thrown in what seems to be an epic Spider-Man movie level quality of story on top of it all. We've already seen a load of gameplay trailers, cinematic trailers, even a video where the developers broke down exactly how the swinging mechanic works, and it works the way we all wanted it to. So I think it's obvious and more than safe to say that this is going to be a game worth buying. And as someone who has followed Spider-Man games for a very long time, trust me, this game will be worth buying. Next game not worth it you can find in the depths of the PlayStation Network, and it's actually kind of perfect talking about this one right after Spider-Man because this game is called Energy Hook. You know how I was saying a lot of us diehard Spider-Man fans really wanted a game where you could freely swing around the city and blah 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 with good controls and blah blah blah? Well, someone became sick of waiting, and since they couldn't get the license to Spider-Man, they crowdfunded Energy Hook. And I actually remember this game from its really early stages, like pre-alpha stage, because as I said, myself and my friends all followed the Spider-Man games and wanted another good one, so when we heard about this, we were actually excited. But when it finally launched on PlayStation 4 years later in 2016, not only was it too late, because at that point we had the amazing Spider-Man games on PlayStation, and while they weren't that amazing, they were better than Energy Hook, but also Energy Hook itself didn't look like it ever progressed out of the pre-alpha stage I saw years beforehand. It looks like they kind of just got to a point where they were like, alright, we're done. I think it was supposed to launch on Xbox One and Vita as well, but as far as I could tell, that never happened. And I would assume that's because it didn't do well on PlayStation. Good. It's ugly, it doesn't replicate Spider-Man swinging at all. You have a jetpack that you can use to boost and even get some extra air between swings, which kind of ruins the whole building your own momentum thing that Spider-Man was all about, when you can just get your own boost of momentum instantly at a touch of a button whenever you want. And the gross buildings in this game are either too tall to do sweet tricks and jumps off, or too low to even swing on. You'll constantly be fighting terrible controls, you never know where your hook is going to end up. In my opinion, this game is completely unplayable. You're better off playing Spider-Man 2 back on GameCube. Next we have Digimon Story, why am I fooling? Next we have Digimon Story, third time's a charm. Next we have Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth Hacker's Memory. Nailed it. Nailed it. Hacker's Memory is set in the same world as the original Cyber Sleuth game, and the story's concept is similar to Ready Player One, or to put it more plainly, set in a world where people log into a VR world using avatars. Your account in the VR world can be incredibly valuable, and the story revolves around the main character having his account stolen. So he joins a hacker group in hopes to find out who stole the account. Of course, using digital monsters called Digimon, you battle your way to the answers you seek. You collect Digimon the same way you did in the first game. Every time you come across one, you scan it, and when you collect enough data on a specific type, you can form that Digimon. This game includes 90 extra Digimon not seen in the first game, which brings the total up to over 300. You know what they say about Digimon? You gotta catch them all. Do they have an equivalent to that? I don't think so. Gotta digi them all? That sounds wrong. The battles will of course remind you of Pokemon battles because it's captured monsters turn-based battling other captured monsters, but it is its own fleshed out turn-based battle mechanic, just like any other RPG. It only feels similar to Pokemon because, well, it's monsters that end in mon battling each other in a turn-based setting. Very similar. All up, it looks, plays, and feels pretty much the same as the first game. Essentially, it's a huge DLC pack that received a physical release. It certainly has more than enough content to warrant its own physical release and price tag, and of course, it's its own brand new, original Digimon's story. For those that played Dragon's Crown on PlayStation 3 back in 2013, holy moly, we're all getting very old. You'll already know that this 2D RPG game that plays very similar to old school beat-em-ups is super fun, and I think it managed to hide itself as a hidden gem for a while before it blew up in popularity, even making itself a little hard to find in stores for a while. So it makes sense that now we have Dragon's Crown Pro on PlayStation 4. This version of the game features 4K resolution support, 60 FPS, a newly recorded soundtrack performed by a live orchestra, online crossplay and save compatibility with the PlayStation 4 and Vita versions of the game, and all original DLC. So if you have been waiting to play this game, now is your chance. You and up to 3 friends, online or offline, can utilize spells, melee, and range attacks to your advantage to go on a story-driven quest to save the land. Find loot, level up, enjoy the story, and marvel at the artwork. For sure, one of the best beat-em-ups you can get your hands on. Except for this beat-em-ups, but you can't get your hands on that. I'm a married man. I embarrass myself as much as I embarrass anyone else. Even though I've given God of War 2 dedicated videos on my channel, one being a spoiler-free review and another tackling every single little aspect I love about the game and breaking it down and fleshing it out, so I feel like I've already talked about every single little detail of this game I possibly can. But even though I've done those videos, I feel if I didn't put this on one of these lists, I would still hear it in the comment section. Yeah, this game is worth buying, and if you really want to know why it's worth buying, you can watch those videos down below. But to summarize it in one word, it would probably be boy, 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 boy. This is a great game. It's a bad joke. So out of all the games not worth it on this list, this one probably had the most money and budget thrown at it, and that's Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5. And yes, I know it's on Xbox as well, and this is supposed to be an exclusive list, but let's be honest, PlayStation doesn't really screw up their games that badly. Knack and Knack 2 is about as bad as things get for Sony. So I feel like on these lists, I'm always picking on these little indie games that barely got themselves through development. I feel like a big old bully. So let's just make an exception for this one and talk about Tony Hawk. Honestly, this is one of the largest cases of big budget screw-ups I have ever seen. When you have such a solid foundation of games to work from, with a market that is craving skating games, you shovel out this steaming pile of garbage, seemingly before it was even finished? With more bugs and technical issues that can be countered, it makes a game where you are supposed to be pinpoint accurate with every single movement incredibly frustrating and at times impossible. For the most part, I would say this game is broken. As soon as you pick up that controller, you'll want to throw it back down again. Bland levels, terrible camera, and frustrating controls with horrible online issues. So even as someone who doesn't really like skating games, I would buy Skate 4 the day it comes out. I'd be excited. Make that game. No more Tony Hawks if they're gonna be like this. Alright, so for this last game, I had to get a little bit creative because I think between the last two videos of 10 games worth buying, I think I've covered all of the good PlayStation 4 physical games worth buying. So I've dived into the PlayStation Network to pluck this one out, and it is an exclusive. It's called Fighting X Leia, and I had no idea it exists before this video, so I felt it was perfect. It's honestly a pretty neat fighting game, which really took me by surprise. It's a spiritual successor to Fighting Lair and the Street Fighter X series, and it features many of the same characters from that series. It has a fantastic art style, both in the stages and the range of unique fighters. Very awesome 90s feeling music. The combos and special moves are awesome to pull off and they look great. And the fighting controls are similar to Street Fighter, so it's easy to pick up and play if you're familiar with those controls. So if you love fighting games and you or your friends have been looking for that next fighting game to bring to a game night and throw down on, Fighting X Leia might be the one for you to check out. You know how I said I didn't like picking on indie developers? Well, sometimes they just bring it on themselves. Inner Kung Fu. I don't know how I missed this one either. The writing scares me, the visuals offend me, and the gameplay is non-existent. I feel like I'm being brainwashed while playing it. It's only $3, but it's not even worth that. There's no Kung Fu. There is zero amounts of Kung Fu. It's like some weird Tai Chi thing where you just press buttons every now and then, and the overlays and the graphic. What's with the? I don't think I even have a way of describing how much I hate everything this game is. I don't think I have a way of describing how bad this game is. I would rather play Pure Electric Love. There, that's the best I can do. That game, wow, that's bad. Well guys, there you have it. Another 10 Nintendo, no, stop. Well guys, there you have it. Another 10 PlayStation 4 games worth buying and 5 not worth buying. I really enjoyed talking about PlayStation again. It's been a while and I'd love to do it more often. Click or tap on this video right here if you liked this one because that one's probably a lot better. Subscribe if you haven't already because we've become best friends. I really appreciate it. As always, thanks to my Patreons for being such amazing people. Follow me on Twitch because I stream every Monday and I'm about to go play some PlayStation VR and work on a list video for the PlayStation VR. How do you feel about that?